Module 2 covers the structure and function of the bacterial cell. Bacterial structure is foundational knowledge that you will need through the rest of the course, and this is why we put it at the very beginning. Understanding bacterial structure is pivotal to understanding everything else about microorganisms. We will begin with some general concepts about bacterial structure and then talk a bit about how we see these little organisms. We will then get into the heart of the issue, working from the inside of the cell to the outside. We will start with the cytoplasm, move to the membrane, and finally describe the structures present in the outer layers of microorganisms. The module ends looking at the differences between bacteria and archaea and the differences between bacteria and eukarya. Here are the learning outcomes. Here's more learning outcomes because it's a long module. For microorganisms, the cell is the organism, and cells are cells. A cell is a basic unit of life. By the way, did you know the term cell comes from the work of Robert Hooke? He was looking at cork under a microscope and commented that the little divisions between areas in it look like prison cells, and the name stuck. Every cell has similar components at the macromolecular level: proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, sugars, and various small molecules. The critical divider between the cell and the environment is the cell membrane. It serves as a barrier, senses the outside world, and holds together all the cell components. Microorganisms have the same basic life functions as macroorganisms. First, a cell must separate its contents from the environment. It must be able to also uptake food from the environment and use it in its metabolism. The cell then releases any accumulated waste back into the environment. Thus, a cell is an open system. The goal of a living thing is to make more of itself. A cell uses this energy to grow and eventually divide. Some cells change often because of a signal from the environment. For example, if nutrient conditions become poor, some cells will differentiate into a spore. Cells also often communicate with other cells, especially in multicellular organisms, but we are finding out now that even microbial cells will communicate within and beyond their species. Movement. Many living things are capable of movement, and microorganisms are no exception. Finally, living things evolve. Microorganisms will accumulate mutations over time, have variations within a species, and the environment selects, the best successful organisms to continue. Traits 1, 2, and 6, compartmentalization and metabolism, reproduction, and evolution are common to all organisms. 3, 4, and 5 are present in many, but not all microorganisms. You may wonder why microorganisms are small. Part of the reason has to do with efficiency. A smaller cell has a larger surface to area ratio. Consider a 1 micrometer diameter spherical cell. If it was a perfect sphere, it would have a surface to volume ratio of 3. If you increase its size by just 1 micrometer, its surface to volume ratio drops by half. If you make it 4 micrometers, its surface to volume ratio is 0.75 instead of 3. A smaller surface to volume ratio makes it take longer for signals from the outside world to be detected on the inside. So cells remain small. Even in massively large organisms, they are made of millions and sometimes trillions of cells, preserving the small size of the basic unit of life. Cells can be all sorts of shapes and sizes. There are bacilli, which are rod-shaped cells. There are cocci, which are spheres. There are spirochetes, which are corkscrew shapes. There are even amorphous square and cells connected by tubes, as shown in the lower right with Rotomicrobium vanellii. So you can have all sorts of different shapes and sizes to cells, and the only thing that's going to restrict it is if it's a disadvantage. And clearly, having different shapes has advantages for some reason. So why are there so many different shapes? Cell shape can often be dictated by the environment. If you are in a low nutrient environment, a larger surface area can make it easier to acquire nutrients. A large surface area can manifest as a stalk to a cell. If you need to defend yourself from predators such as a phagocyte that eats cells or multicellular microvores, you may get really big or really small, too big to eat or so small they don't see you. You may have an appendage that helps you to attach to a surface. A cell shape may make it easier for cells to disperse and find new environments. Your shape may make it easier to move through an environment. A cell may make a spore, which has a different shape and is part of differentiation. Finally, why not? Evolution only punishes you if a trait causes an organism to be at a disadvantage. If the cell shape of the organism doesn't cause a disadvantage, then it could happen. In order to study microorganisms, you have to be able to see them. An essential tool for visualizing microorganisms is the microscope. There are many different types of microscopes for viewing cells. The light microscope and phase contrast microscopes are present in many instructional microbiology laboratories and allow the visualization of the overall shape of bacterium as well as any large structures. If you take one of these classes, you will probably use these microscopes. If you want to see structures in finer detail, you have to move to specialized microscopes. An electron microscope can see the fine details of a bacterium, almost to the resolution of large protein complexes. If you want to determine the structure of proteins, then you have to use very powerful methods such as X-ray crystallography. You can read all about these types of microscopes in the textbook. All right, now let's do a little activity where you are going to pretend you're a scientist and you're going to see if you can, and I'm going to see if you can figure out which scope would be best. Your brilliant but absent-minded research mentor is terribly excited. You have identified a novel bacterium and it's time to take the measurements of it. To first visualize the microbe and determine its cell shape, what type of scope would you use? The correct answers are either a light microscope, after you stain the cells, of course, or a phase microscope. Either of those would be very good for first observing the organism. They're cheap, they're fast, it's really efficient. Your bacterium has a novel form of motility that uses cytoplasm as if they were stilts and moves across the surface. The scientific community is doubtful of your hypothesis. To begin to test your hypothesis, you first have to demonstrate the existence of the pili on the outside of the cell. What type of microscope would you use and why? The correct answer here is C. You'd probably want to use a scanning electron microscope because it's going to give you enough detail that you can actually see the pili. Pili aren't that big that you'll see them in a light microscope or phase microscope without using dyes, so a scanning electron microscope here would probably be best. Finally, you have discovered the pili that you hypothesized. You now want to determine the exact structure of the protein that forms the pilus. There's only one protein. What method would you use to do this? The correct answer here is X-ray crystallography. You need to get the structure of the protein. You're not going to be able to visualize that with the other methods. Again, you can read more about these methods in the textbook. Finally, small prokaryotic cells usually grow more slowly than larger cells because they have trouble accessing nutrients. True or false? The answer is false. Smaller cells grow better because they have a better surface to volume ratio. It's larger, so they have more access to nutrients. Now we begin our exploration of bacterial cell structure in detail. We will begin with the cytoplasmic region and move out to the cell membrane and finally finish up with the cell envelope. Remember, even simple cells such as bacteria are complex and highly organized. They are not a big bag of enzymes, which was of the reigning philosophy when we first started investigating organisms. We found out that that's not true, and there's all sorts of complexity and structure, even in bacterial cells. The cytoplasm is densely packed and highly structured. I love this illustration on this slide because it gives a visual representation of the cytoplasm. It's not a dilute laboratory solution. It has more gel-like traits. That changes how the chemistry works and how things happen. The cytoplasm contains the nucleoid, the gene expression machinery, most enzymatic reactions, the cytoskeleton, inclusions, these are structures that serve various purposes for the cell, and many solutes. All of these come together to serve the cell's needs. Let's go through each of these in a little bit more detail. The nucleoid is the region of DNA in bacterial cells. It is highly compacted because it has to be. For example, in E. coli, the DNA genome is 1.5 millimeters in length, yet the cell is only 3.5 microns. Thus, the DNA needs to be highly compacted. This compaction is achieved by organizing the DNA into loops of about 50,000 base pairs. And again, a base pair is one set of nucleotides in the DNA. And then supercoiling the DNA. The twisting is analogous to when you wind up a rubber band by twisting it. Taken together, these two treatments will compact the DNA about 1,000-fold and allow it to fit inside a bacterial cell. DNA binding proteins help organize the DNA. However, remember, even in this compacted state, it still needs to be accessible for replication, repair, recombination, transcription. There's no membrane separation. Okay, now I'm going to frustrate all you guys that are used to computer science or engineering, because biology always has exceptions. Having said there are no membranes that separate the nucleoid, I'm now going to contradict myself and say that some species of bacteria do keep their DNA enclosed in a membrane. And you can see this here. This is Planktomyces. They have a membrane, and the nucleoid is inside that membrane. But this is an exception. Most bacteria do not have their nucleoid inside a membrane. Inside of the cytoplasm is the gene expression machinery. The heart of this is the ribosome. I'm sure you have heard about the function of the ribosome in your biology class, and we will discuss this more in Module 3, the central dogma. Here I only want to describe its structure. It is 62% RNA, as you can see in that structure on the right, and 38% protein, and is divided into two subunits. That's right, the ribosome is mostly RNA. The 30S ribosome has 21 proteins and 1 RNA, the 16S ribosomal RNA, of about 1,500 base pairs, while the 50S subunit has 31 proteins and 2 RNAs. The 5S ribosomal RNA, about 150 base pairs, and the 23S ribosomal RNA, about 2,900 base pairs. The RNA catalyzes the core enzymatic function of the ribosome. An important point to remember, it is a ribozyme. The ribosome is also a dynamic structure that changes shape as it carries out its purpose. While the structure of the cytoskeleton is not visible in the microscope, bacteria do have a cytoskeleton. It is a set of stable yet dynamic protein filament structures that can self-assemble and disassemble and show long-range order within the cell. The cytoskeleton is involved in shape, making cocci different than rods, mechanical strength, intracellular transport, cell movement, chromosome separation, cell division, and polarity. In other words, determining where the ends of the cell are located. It's also involved in other types of subcellular organization. We are going to highlight two important bacterial cytoskeleton proteins. These proteins are common in bacteria. MREB has a similar structure to actin, which is involved in microfilaments in eukaryotes, and it's a protein in your muscles. It is important in cell shape, polarity, movement of molecules, e.g. chromosome segregation, cell wall, and cell wall synthesis. MREB is found in many rod-shaped bacteria. FtsZ is similar to tubulin that is part of microtubules in eukaryotic cells. It is important in cell division, helping to form this Z ring. This Z ring is found in most bacteria. On the right is an image of the Z ring forming in a bacterial cell as it divides. An antibody against the Z ring has been added, and it stains the cells and helps to visualize where the Z ring is. Attached to the antibody is a fluorescent compound. By shining UV light on the slide, anywhere the antibody is will fluoresce. You can see the Z ring is dictating where the cell divides. And we will talk more about this in Module 6 on cell division. Cytoskeletal proteins serve many different functions in the cell. They will be involved in chemotaxis, spatial organization, i.e. cell wall synthesis, and gene expression. The graphic on the right shows a bunch of examples, and we will cover these in other modules as we go through the course. Okay, concept check here to see how you're doing. If the FtsZ protein became inactive, the cell would probably what? The correct answer is C, fail to divide and make long filaments. Remember that FtsZ forms the Z ring in the cell and is involved in dictating where the cell divides. If you get rid of that function, the cell can't divide anymore. There is also a number of inclusions in the cell. Inclusions are things visible in the microscope that serve some defined purpose for the cell. Some function in nutrient storage. Some function for compartmentalization. For example, carboxysomes accumulate enzymes needed for carbon dioxide fixation. Some function for movement and orientation. One example here includes gas vesicles of cyanobacteria that are used to adjust the height in the water column. This way the bacterium can get the optimum amount of light. Another example is magnetosomes. These little magnets inside some bacteria tell them up from down in their environment by sensing the magnetic field of the Earth. This concludes our coverage of the cytoplasm.